What up, guys? Welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, episode 337. Today, we're going to talk about a rule for Jiu-Jitsu that's important when it comes to competitions, and it's something I see it all the time. I saw it this weekend, both at my competition, and then I was also watching some of the matches at the Nogi Pans. I saw it there, and I've made the mistake myself, but it's something that just shows kind of a weak mindset, and it's just something you want to avoid doing. So we'll talk about that in a bit as we get into it, and hopefully, if you also too, if you can kind of get over this, it'll also make jiu-jitsu competitions a lot more fun for you too. So
Mhm.
anyway, more on that in a bit. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. They're one of the premier CBD companies out there. They have a ton of different products to try out, everything from your traditional CBD supplements, tinctures, gummies, things of that nature, to things like their newest CBN gummy that they have, which is called Stay Asleep. The CBN compound is supposed to be a little bit more helpful with in regards to sleep, and I feel like I get something from it, and so I use it because, again, for me, sleep is our number one tool for recovery. And like right now, I'm in a situation where I'm trying to gain weight for a competition,
Mhm.
and which is requiring a lot more food, a lot more lifting, and then on top of that, I'm also trying to get ready for a competition, which is requiring more training and drilling and so forth. And so I have to get enough sleep, and if I don't get enough sleep, like I did the other night, because our toddler was running a fever for a day and a half, which parents, you guys understand this. It really wrecked me. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I was real messed up. And, but anyway, that said, when I can get a normal full night of sleep, I do seem to notice an improvement with the Stay Sleep gummy. If you guys want to check it out or try out any Charlotte's Web supplements, go to their website at charlottesweb.com. The promo code is JiuJitsu30 for 30% off. CHEWJITSU 30 for 30% off. Also, thanks to Epic Roll, epicrollbjj.com is the website. They make a range of different jiu-jitsu products, everything from rash guards and no-gi shorts to gis, t-shirts, and merch, anything you want, really. And again, they make really cool designs. They have great customer service. They're also a big supporter of the PGF competition, which is a really fun competition that's going on at the time of recording this. If you guys are interested in watching competitions, you should definitely go check out the PGF. My buddy Brandon McGaffron came up with it. It's a really fun, exciting jiu-jitsu competition. And again, the Epic Roll company is a big supporter of that. But again, if you want to check out any of their stuff, they have a lot of different really cool stuff. And I'm also going to be getting my new jiu-jitsu rash guards made for them coming up in the near future. If you guys want to check them out, go to their website at epicrollbjj.com, and the website, or the promo code rather, is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. CHEWJITSU 20. And if you guys would like to support the podcast directly, get access to a bunch of different free perks, including a library of content that has some seminars and things that I've recorded, some back end stuff that's not released anywhere. Also, to a warm up routine specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners. So if you're tight and inflexible or getting older and would like to keep your bucket of bones moving a little bit better, there's some routines in there specifically for you. You can check it out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And if you become a patron, become a member, you'll have access to that stuff. And you also have some other other nice perks like ad-free versions of the podcast and things like that. But again, it'll also support the podcast. You get a bunch of cool stuff, and for a very inexpensive price. And last but not least, guys, if you guys would like to get my daily email that I send out and also receive a ebook that goes into 12 different drilling strategies, then you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. When you join up, you'll then get access to my daily email that I send out, which goes through just tons of different stuff that I think could be useful to you or possibly just interesting to you. But then I also send you a free ebook that comes to you, and that has 12 different strategies for training and adjusting the way that you go about your open rolls and open training. And the reason for doing this is a lot of people lack focus during their training. And if they added focus to their training, typically they would get more from it. They would make more improvement with their skill, have less frustrations, the whole thing. And it doesn't have to be that complicated to do it. It's something that everybody can do from white belt to black belt. I'll show you how to do it. Check it out at my website, chewjitsu.net/join. So with that said, guys, let's jump into this podcast and talk about a rule. The rule basically is that you don't want to be a sore loser in grappling. very simple, right? This is something we talk about. We tell kids to do this, when they're young. At least they did in my day, right? I don't know about today, but they did in my day, right? You tell the kids not to be a sore loser. Well, this weekend when I was at the Jiu-Jitsu Open, we're competing. I'm watching the matches go. You always get a few people that get upset about calls and get upset about decisions and things like that. It happens, but it wasn't too bad. But where I really saw it was, after the nogi pans, I just came across several different people who, again, were posting these long, drawn out messages about how they've been wronged by the refs or the IBJJF or whatever. And it's one of those things where I think if you, I think it was Abraham Lincoln. He had this idea that I've since stolen, which was basically, let's say he had a really bad disagreement with someone, or he was just pissed at someone. He would write down a letter to them, a scathing letter, and they found a box of these letters, by the way. Um, just scathing letter to these people, and say what he really wanted to say. Then he would take it, fold it up, put it in the box, and then he would write them another letter, and then would make it a little bit nicer, get it out of his system, so to speak. And I think that like is probably a good strategy for most people, right? So like again, and listen, I totally get it because I did it one time too. I had a competition years back where I was up against a guy and he put me in a move and he ended up jamming his like knuckle into my eye. And like I just remember feeling it ended up cutting my eye a little bit below, like there was a little bit of blood, but I remember feeling a knuckle basically push into my eye socket. And I was just not ready for it. I backed off and I was like, I'm like looking at the ref. I'm like, he jammed his finger in my eye. And the ref, who was someone I had competed against, before, he just stands there very stoically, quietly, not even responding to me. And I'm like, and I didn't know what to do. What I should have done was go to the head ref. But it is what it is, but I made a long, big post and I was very upset. And I remember this whole storm of just nonsense started on the internet. And then I eventually removed the information back. And I was like, okay, not doing that again. It wasn't the right thing to do. I was emotional and I wasn't thinking about it. And there's better ways I could have gone about it. And so I would sort of encourage anybody else, if you're in a situation, do the same thing. If you're really upset, you want to make this big emotional post, get on your computer or whatever, write down this big long post about how you've been wronged and so forth. And then just let it sit there and then come back to it in 24 hours. And no matter what, just don't post it. Like again, just look at it if you want to, but more than likely in 24 hours, you're not going to want to post it. But again, it's not going to change anything. It makes no difference. Mm-hmm. It just is what it is, right? It may not, you may have been wronged. You may have been screwed over. It happens. Everybody gets screwed over sometimes, right? Not to be political, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out right now because, I'm probably I feel like one of the guys in politics who doesn't have a team because I agree on some stuff on one side.
I'm with you.
I'm right there in the middle, right? And I'm like, they make sense on different issues, right? And so I'm not a part of the team, and so I just look at it. But a lot of people that are team players, for the last, gosh, it's probably been since I was a kid with George Bush's election. It's whenever one side wins, it's the other one contests it. And they'll say for 4 years, this guy's illegitimate. You shouldn't be in there. What they keep saying it over and over again. So I wonder if we're going to have that again this time where he's illegitimate, shouldn't be in there, whatever. You're just look, you lost. It happened. Move on. Let's make a better strategy for next time and do your best. You know what I mean? Because it's not going to change anything. And it's a waste of time, waste of effort. But I say that just because, again, a lot of times I see this where one in particular where a guy lost on a controversial advantage, right, from his opponent. And it's man, I know it sucks, but you could have probably done something to win that match. I'll give you an example of a guy I went against a couple of years ago. I didn't know that, because I didn't really talk to the guy, but he seemed upset. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know that he was very upset about me winning the match. because I thought it was clear. I thought I would won because I was on top of him and I was making attempts to pass and I was in control of where the position was. I put myself in half guard and was, controlling that. And I was never in danger of sweeps or submissions or anything. And then afterwards, like, I was going to send that guy a message because he was a really tough opponent. He was my toughest opponent that day. And I wanted to reach out to him and say, hey, man, like, you're friggin' tough as nails, good job, whatever. Just, I don't know, just it's something I do sometimes. I'll keep in touch with some of the guys I compete with, whether I win or lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to go message him and I saw this picture of him. He's like, had 2 thumbs down and he's like basically talking about how he got screwed at the Worlds. I was like, screwed? I was like, he's talking about me. I was like, how did he get screwed? I was like, you were never in offense. Like, you never had me in a sweep. You never had me in a submission. I put myself in your half guard. Like, I don't understand, I broke your guard, put myself in half guard, was up in your face, had you flattened out several times for a pass. I was like, I don't understand. And so again, like, it is what it is. But again, I just think it's a bad look. And especially the deeper you get into it, if you're a black belt, a brown belt, whatever, the words that get talked about in jiu-jitsu, like lose the ego, be mentally strong, all this stuff. Well, this is your chance to like put that on the line, right? Because again, if you go into the competition and you're throwing a fit after you lose because you lost a close match or whatever, mentally you're showing some fragility there, right? You can't take that loss. But Eugene, you were even talking about it before. Also on the other side of it is like you should be able to win reasonably too.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're going, I mean, I guess, if you win some big tournament, have a good time with it, whatever. But there's a certain level of control that you should have over your emotions with these things, in my opinion. But anyway, going back to it, do not be fragile. Do not start to flip out if you lose a match. Don't post about it, about how you've been wronged by this, Just accept it. I got beat. It's even like, it was like Nicholas Marigali, right? An amazing competitor. But he was like saying, Pixley didn't beat me. I separated my shoulder. It's like, nah, man, like you got beat because he threw you and he threw you which is why your shoulder got separated. And you got caught in a darce right afterwards. Like, now, will that guy come back and submit Pixley someday? Who knows, man? Nicholas Marigali is one of the best ever, but it's just a bad look, right? What would have been more, to me, would have been more admirable and more like, yeah, dope, cool, would have been just saying like, damn, he got me. I'm going to get healed up and I'll be back next time. Done.
I think the people at the top of the heap, like the Marigalis and all these really high level competitors that sometimes, have these losses or upset losses, it can really damage like I think you're trying to keep a certain view of yourself in mind. And by admitting defeat, for some people, I'm not saying for everyone, but admitting that, hey, this person got the better of me today, that might impact their confidence or impact. So being in some ways in denial of that loss, because that was a loss, obviously. He submitted you, and regardless, he put you on the floor in a position where you had to plant your arm, or you chose to plant your arm and dislocate your shoulder as a result of his, technique. Like, I think some of that denial keeps maybe people sane or keeps them at a level where they feel like they're still the best, and it doesn't. Maybe it's just like fail safes to not shake their confidence.
But I mean, and that's the thing too. Like, going back to him, he was sort of like posting about the ADCC as if, hey, I'm the double champ today. I'm, basically going in there as if he thought he was just going to walk over everybody.
Yeah.
And again, that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's a mindset of expectation. You set this expectation that you were going to win, and then you didn't. Like, you can't set expectations. Setting expectations is a dangerous business, because this is what happens. If you set an expectation, you do not control everything, right? Like, Marigali made a split-second mistake by posting on his arm. It happens. He probably has done that plenty of times and never separated his shoulder, but this one time it was a freak situation. Shoulder separates. You can't set expectations, because again, it makes you fragile, because then instead of focusing on what you got to do or being able to accept things as they come, you're then looking at it and comparing it to this expectation that you thought you were supposed to have, where you're like, oh, I was supposed to be the double champ today, and instead I separated my shoulder. And then you start to have like a mental issue going on there, where you're having this disconnect from, here's who I actually am right now, the guy that got put out before the medal round, and here's who I was expecting to be at the end of the day.
Do you think some of that is possibly putting it out in the universe. Like, I'm putting it out there that I'm going to be this thing. I'm going to be this champion. And for me, it's like, if I put it out there, that means it's destined to happen. Like, do you think that gives people confidence in some way, or some type of, maybe some athletes really want that pressure? Like a Gordon Ryan, who hasn't lost in 10 years. When he loses, because everybody loses, he will lose eventually. And when he does, that fall is going to be, it's going to be a big one. But on the other side of it, people really want to see him compete, whether it's to win or lose, watch him win or watch him lose. People are going to watch him. That's the, and I don't know if like putting yourself out there in that way gives you more attention. So when you do have a victory, you kind of prove
Of course, it
yourself
gives you
right.
more attention.
Well, it gives you like, I made this, I guess, prediction of myself. And look where I am. I'm right. I did what I set out to do, and I told everybody what I was going to do. And I think in some capacity, it makes people very gives them motivation. Like, Gordon writing the submission he's going to hit and put in an envelope, and then hitting that submission. It makes you look like like you're really on top of your game. But in some aspects, the fall is a lot higher, and the lows can be a lot lower.
Well, I mean, a couple things. Prediction-wise, predictions are incredibly popular, and you'll get lots of attention making predictions.
Yeah.
Think about, there's guys like, I forgot the guy's name that's on the TV that does all the stock picks, and he's so wrong all the time. Like, it's a joke with like people that follow stocks and stuff. They're like, this guy is so wrong, like all the time. But the dude's had a TV show since I was in high school. Just like,
Is he the
again,
bald guy? Got the bald head, like
yeah. He's got the little buttons. Bye, bye, bye.
Yeah,
Bye,
like the
right?
bull and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I got you.
And so,
I don't know
and
his
maybe
name.
I'm getting that wrong, but from the guys that I know that are like knowledgeable about like stocks and finances, they're like,
Sure.
this guy's such an idiot. Like, it's like he's always wrong. They're like, they were like, one of them was making a joke. They're like, I don't know if he's like working for these big companies and like purposely doing stuff to like
Yeah.
help, you know what I mean, to help out, whatever. But he's on there. It's very popular, right? So like, again, making predictions is popular. Imagine to look at all the people, all that was during the election cycle for this last week was predictions, right? Who's going to win, whatever.
Yeah.
Look at all the different stuff that just happened over the years of like making predictions. It's popular stuff. Even people calling like a psychic hotline back in the days, just predictions. Just some person's making some BS prediction about you.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, it still boggles my mind that we used to have psychic hotlines and anybody called in thinking that was a real thing, right? But so there's predictions, so that makes you popular, and there's also the
Miss
yeah, Miss
Cleo.
Cleo, that wasn't even like, it
Can't
wasn't even real,
remember
right?
that, dude. Yeah,
And
she
then
didn't even have she had like a Jamaican accent, but she wasn't even
it's
Jamaican.
fake. She was just like an
Yeah.
actress that they like got to be in there.
That's hilarious.
It's funny. But then there's also the Babe Ruthing of things, right? So calling your
Sure.
shots. And when you call your shots like that, it's impressive because you're kind of, everybody's looking around like, can this guy really do what he said he was going to do?
Mhm.
Because that's a tough thing to do against high competitors, highly skilled competitors. And so being able to Babe Ruth it, that's a thing. That's like a really cool, captivating, attention grabbing thing. With Gordon, I think a couple things. One, I would be curious to see if he did lose, especially if he lost like decisively, right? If he would simply just get up and be like, good job, because when he wins, he tends to, like, his social media presence versus who he is in person. They're two different things, right? Like his social media presence leading up to matches, I mean, just a turd burger, right? Just
Sure.
making fun of people doing stuff. But but then once the match is over, he's typically like, hey, good job, man, whatever. And I got so much respect for this guy that I mean, like, very, very complimentary. Like, I mean, you couldn't lose to a nicer guy in that situation,
Sure.
right? In person. On social media, different story. But in social media, it's a mess. And so I think that, for him, if he loses decisively, the social media storm would be crazy. But I don't know if he would simply just get up and say, all right, man, good job, man. This guy got me. Good work. Just kind of, and leave it at that. I would be curious to see that. But I think that the reason why if he does lose at some point and decisively do so, why it would be such a big thing is because of the personality he's created.
Sure.
because he constantly digs at people, and he creates this adversarial sort of persona. But the sad thing is that if you want some attention, like, that sort of thing is so much more effective. I mean, again, people, they just respond to it now. People are so bombarded with information. People are not thoughtful about where they consume information. And if you look on the internet, it's become this ever increasing, it's like an addiction, because when people see something you know, that conjures up really charged emotions in them, it gives them a feeling, and they may not like it in the sense that it makes them feel good, but they can't look away. But it becomes like an addiction where it's this ever increasing like amount of outrage that needs to be produced to get people's attention. Not all people, but a lot of
Mhm.
people. And
Yeah.
so, like any addiction, you got to keep upping the ante. You got to increase the dosage. And so I feel like we're in this situation now with like everything, where everything just becomes more nasty and, just mean and outrageous. You see it in
Yeah.
everything from jujitsu to the going back to the election stuff, right? You see it there. It's like that used to not be the way, and now it is, and you're just trying to grab people's attention, and this is what people respond to. And so if people would want things to change, they do so by withholding their attention. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like that. If you want things to change, if we collectively wanted things to change, if you withheld your attention and you said, "Well, I'm just going to go over here because I don't want to see this stuff," then it would force people and companies to change their behaviors because nobody's paying attention to them.
Yeah.
But it's like a car wreck. It just I can't turn away, so
Yeah.
people just they look.
I think you brought up a couple really good points about Gordon. Going back to that, like he builds up the matches, and that's why people really want to watch him. He puts a lot of stakes and a lot of like attention to the match, but then like obviously we haven't seen him lose in years, so who knows how he's going to handle a loss. But you
Right.
can also look at an individual about how they win, and he's always been gracious in victory, right? Like he's won ADCC title after title, he's won all the big tournaments, worlds. I've never seen him like screaming and ripping his shirt off and being crazy. He's always like hand raised, shakes the hand, walks off the match, shakes the hand of the coach, opposing coach, boom, boom, off he goes. And like literally kind of just like I told you so. And this is
Mhm.
the norm. Like he's used to winning, in a way that is just kind of like this is my norm, and this is not anything new or not anything big. And so I think being a gracious winner, not like haha, not talking shit, essentially, not, some people do, but not doing that. He just kind of wins and he's gracious in victory. And I think that would show, and that shows to me, if he did lose, how he may have, like, how he would react to a loss.
Yeah, it may be because who knows? It may be indicative to how he would lose, right?
Yeah.
And so again, it just losing and getting upset and throwing a fit, it just never looks good, man. It's never a good look for anybody, right? It's like you can look at Conor McGregor as an example. Look at Conor McGregor when he lost to Nate Diaz. He lost like a boss. He got up, congratulations, and then he goes out there and he just like he lost like a champ. He got up and into his ad. And then later on, I forgot what fight it was, but then he lost, and then he turned into like got really weird about it, was like getting upset and like whiny about it. You're like, dude, that's a bad look. It's just like, again, there's a difference to it, right? Like if you can lose, it shows strength because you're able to take that hit and you're in
Mhm.
control, right? This goes back to the idea from that I shared a while ago from Ernest Becker, talking about being a well-centered human, right? The idea that the things that you own, the things that you associate yourself with, the stories you tell about yourself, if you have control of them, when something like takes a hit, whether you scratched your really nice car or you lost a match, and so now your perception of yourself, instead of being this winning jiu-jitsu competitor, is now I just lost a match, whatever it is, you have control of all that stuff and your imbalance of it, which makes you well centered, opposed to you scratch your nice car or you lose the match and you flip out because again it's a hit not just to the thing or this match or whatever, but it's a hit to the self-construction, the story you tell about yourself and who you are. And when that happens, these things that aren't necessarily you are throwing you off balance. They're
Mhm.
throwing off the perception of who you think you are off balance. And I think that's just a really good way of looking at it, thinking about it in balance and being well centered and having control of those things.
So I would say, like, for me, like, a big descriptor of a sore loser is probably blaming others, not taking ownership. That's probably the like, if I could
100%.
pick one thing, it's probably blaming others. So
100%.
so I got a couple questions for you, Chewy. So think about this as a competitor and as a coach. We can talk about this as a coach too, if you see this going on in your athletes. How do you help someone, or how did you help yourself not become so emotionally charged after a loss, or accept the loss and kind of like going back and be like, all right, I'm going to take ownership over this thing. How do I address it? And then I've got a follow-up question after that. So,
Okay. Well, I mean, the big one was not setting expectations, right? Like when I compete, I'm not like expecting to win. I go in, I'm like, let's just see what happens. I'm gonna go use techniques. Who knows?
yep.
Right? That's it. That's the mindset, right? I'm not expecting to win anything. That's helpful because if you go in there and you're all thinking about the podium and the gold medal and then you don't get it, you're like the kid who waiting around for, to get some toy and then they don't get the toy, then they get upset, right?
Yeah.
Again, just don't set the expectation. The other thing is that what good choice do you have? Right? I mean, it really comes down to that. Like, what choice do you have? You can sit around, you can moan and complain about it, but what good is that? Right? Or you can say, you know what? Sure, I got screwed over in this match. What could I do for next time? Here's an example. I remember at one of the pans that I did years ago, I went against a fella and I took this guy down in the match. I think it was 2 or 3 times. And each time I did this, I took him down out of bounds because the guy would literally, as soon as we started the match, he would scoot his feet. He would step backwards until his feet were right on the out of bounds line, right on the edge. And I was just like so like focused on I'm going to take it to this guy. Shot in a couple takedowns. I know I took him down at least twice, may have been 3 times, can't quite remember. Take him down. And every time we're going out of bounds because I have no room to work because we're going out of bounds. And the ref's not giving him stalling calls. He's not giving me advantages, nothing. And the guy, every time we'd restart the match, he would just back up to the line. So at one point, I lay down and he gets into side control and I lay flat on my back. And I'm basically like telling him, go to mount. Maybe he may have not understood me because I'm speaking English and he's Brazilian. But I'm like, go to mount. I'm laying down flat because my thing is if he goes to mount, I'm going to escape his mount and then I'm going to be able to get into X guard and have an attachment to it. He's not going to be able to get away from me, right? So I was like, let's go to mount. And then as he's in mount, I start to come out the back door for like an underhook and come up to a single leg and he runs away from me. Right. And it's the most frustrating match I've ever had in my life. I at one point looked at the ref and I threw my hands up. I said, bro, what do you want me to do? Like call him for a stalling call. And he did call him for a stalling call after that, but it was like one stalling call too late, too little. So terrible match. I got screwed. The guy should have been called for stalling calls. He was running away, literally started the match. I mean, just it was such a blatant thing, is what it is. Now, I was upset about that match. I got real upset because I was in good shape. I trained really hard for it. And I was just like, damn it. Fast forward about it's happened actually multiple times, but fast forward about 2 years later, I'm in a competition and it's the finals, where we're competing for $1,000, right? A modest sum of money, but hey, it's not bad for jiu-jitsu, getting paid to win matches.
Yep.
And so I'm going against this guy, and there was a point where he was running out of bounds. And I had a takedown and I like steered his little butt around and then shoved him right back in. I'm like, I'm not doing this again. And there was one point where he was scooting to the edge of the mat and I walked backwards and I motioned him. I was like, come here to the center. Let's go. Let's go to the center. Let's fight for the center. Let's not fight on the edge. And there was another match that I had years later where I was up against this big guy in a competition and I got around his back and he was trying to push both of us out of bounds. So like we're on the edge and he's pushing us out of bounds.
Yeah.
And I ran him forward into the center of the ring and then took him down. And, so again, terrible match, terrible situation happened the first one, but I learned from it. And I did the only thing that I could do, which is take control of the stuff that I have control of, which was I'm going to play better tactically. And in those moments with those tactics that are being used on the fly, I'm going to make sure that I don't get screwed over. So if I fought that same guy again, as an example, like I wouldn't shoot those takedowns while his feet were on the edge. I would keep working and I would push him around and get the stalling call and be like, look, I'm pushing him out of bounds. And it was whenever I got him to fight to the center, that's when I would go for the takedowns. And so
Mm.
again, that's why you do it, because you don't have any damn good choice. Right? Like do you sit around forever and cry about it and get upset about it, and then your game doesn't get improved and you don't learn to have better tactics, or do you simply control the things you can control? And that's it, right?
When is there my follow-up is, when is there a good time to complain or make noise or make some kind of, scene in some capacity, like that you feel like you've been wrong? When is there a good time to do that? And is
I
there a
mean,
good way to do it?
well, I mean, I think that, like, when I was talking about the one where I got, like, poked in the eye, I think there was a good call.
Yeah.
I think I could have made a case to the head judge,
Was
head
that
ref.
blatant? Was that like he did on purpose or was it an
Well,
accident?
oh, yeah, so, like, I mean, he basically, I believe he did. I don't think that, because the guy's good. I'm like, I don't think a good black belt would do this unknowing. Basically, I was in my double under position, had
Mhm.
my chin tucked, and he was trying to go for like the no arm triangle. There was no choke anywhere close, because I had my chin tucked, but he had my gi, and it was like
Mhm.
he was like, so
I
my
got
legs
you.
are trapped in a triangle, and all of a sudden it's like I'm getting this knuckle in my eye socket. Now, again, could be completely wrong. Maybe it was a complete accident, but I don't think so. Because I'm like, man, like he's good. He's no slouch. And the amount of bodily control that a really good black belt in jiu-jitsu has, they know wherever their body's doing. So I couldn't imagine that been unintentional. And so, I think I could have made a case to the head ref. I had a cut across my eye here, and I was like, whatever, but maybe not. So again, there's sometimes to make those calls. Uh, I don't know what the line is. You know what I mean? But I think for most people, usually that line's not crossed, right? Um, a bad call, maybe the ref not calling stalling like they should, or maybe you lost to kind of a crappy advantage. That stuff happens.
Yeah.
That's sport. Watch any basketball game and you see it all the time, right? Like, oh, they gave that ref had a bad call. It happens all the time. I think where the line would be is if someone was intentionally treated unfairly in some situation, for some sort of reason, you know what I mean? Like something that was very clear, like if someone was treated very unfairly because of something that was more, I guess you would say, malicious or invidious to them, rather than simply just being a oopsie, bad ref
Yeah.
call, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. I don't know what that line is, but I think there's sometimes to do it, but I think it's more rarer than not, that something like that's going on. I think most of the time it's just, some bad ref calls that happen.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing that I could think of besides what you mentioned is if somebody's like blatantly breaking the rules or cheating, doing something to cheat, doing something illegal, and like maybe the ref doesn't see it or it leads to a submission, whatever it is, doing something kind of playing the rules in a certain way or breaking the rules essentially,
Hmm.
which I think you always try to make a tournament. You guys with the Jiu-Jitsu Open have such a successful tournament with so many submissions, high submission rates. Everybody's gets multiple matches, always happy. Everyone really enjoys the tournaments. I've competed in the Jiu-Jitsu Open in Louisville. I loved it. It was a great tournament. So like I think when people are breaking the rules or sometimes are trying to not do jujitsu, but like play the rules more
Yep.
than do jujitsu. They're playing, I mean, jujitsu in a competition format is really it's a game. We're playing a
Hmm.
game. We're playing a game within certain parameters. However, when somebody takes it's like there's a line there, right? There's a balance of jujitsu and playing the game. And if you're more into playing the game than you are doing jujitsu, then you're like, well, I should have won because I did, just the minimum or played the rules to a certain way, and then they're complaining about it. Like I just think that to me seems weak sometimes when somebody does that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but like cheating or like if you don't win because you're just basically playing to the rules and not doing jujitsu and
Well,
doesn't
so I
turn
mean,
out your way.
a couple things there. One is if there's some guys doing some shady stuff in competitions, if you post it, or you share it, or you make some sort of thing about it, as long as it's not like this emotional thing, I think it's fine.
Right. Let's
Like, for
correct that.
instance, if you say, "Hey, guys, listen, I was at this tournament. I think I got screwed. Look right here. See how this thing happened? And like, this should have been this call or this guy, like, whatever, rep, whatever." And you just leave it there. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's fine. I think that's reasonable. I think the big issue is the emotion, right? You don't want to make some big public thing when you're in an emotionally charged state. You want to take a step back, get control of your bearings, and if you do make some sort of hubbub about it, you do so in a very thoughtful and unemotional way, right? So which is hard, right? You might be very emotionally charged about the thing. I saw a couple of those types of posts regarding situations uh, with IBGF before, or even ADCCs. Like there was one where it was like someone was just like, "What's going on here?" And they were showing these different scoring situations in the ADCC regarding Adam Bradley, and
Mm.
then with his match with Pixley, and they showed how everybody's getting these points, and then they showed Adam Bradley's match against Pixley, and Adam Bradley didn't get the points, but then they were comparing it. They're like, "Hey, what's going on here? Like,
Mm.
what's going on, Mo? Shouldn't he have gotten his points?" So that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so, but they weren't like, ADCC's a bunch of cheaters. They were just like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And I think that was a lot more powerful that way because, you're not looking at someone who's emotionally charged. You're just looking at someone just laying it out. Look at the data here. Look at this information here. You gave these points to other people when they let their hips touch, and but you didn't do it in this match. Why is that?
Mhm.
Hmm? You
Yeah.
know, so I think that's one thing. And then the idea of the game, I'm one of these guys. I think about a lot of things as a game. Everything's kind of a game to some way, right? It's a bunch of rules that we have to follow, and we can build up our experience and these things and skills, and then you play the game. And there's incentives, like games give you incentives to do things, and likewise
Mhm.
in life we have incentives to do certain things. The government might have a certain incentive for you to do a particular thing. Your boss might have incentives for you to do certain things. So lots of things are a game. I think with competitions like the Jiu-Jitsu Open, the thing that we're constantly trying to work towards, which is so tough, is trying to incentivize going for it and actually doing Jiu-Jitsu. Because if you look at, like, for instance, with competitions that are point-based, I love point-based competitions. I've done plenty of them. In a point-based competitions, you have two situations that typically take place. Not always, but typically. One is you have two competitors who do not give a damn, and they're out there to try to take each other's heads off. Like, let's think maybe Gary Tonin. Gary Tonin is an example of a guy who it doesn't matter where you put him, he's going to have a fun match. Gary Tonin, Karan Gracie, one of a great, fantastic match of two guys who basically don't care. They care about the points to some degree, but their main sort of modus operandi is basically, I'm trying to win them by submission. I'm
Right.
trying to finish this guy. And both of those guys kind of traditionally always do that, no matter what format you put them in, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is that you see a lot of in IBGF tournaments, and I've seen so many, and this is point-based competitions in general, ADCC included, is that guys will get up on points, and as soon as they have that point advantage, they back off because they're now winning the match, right? I was thinking about this weekend. You said you're now winning the match. So as long as you don't screw it up, you now won the match. So that win is there. So they're clinging to it. And instead of taking chances, most cases they just kind of back off and they play very defensively. You see a lot of
Mhm.
those types of matches, right? Where guys will get up a point or two and then they just kind of like do very little, just look kind of busy, right out to the win. It's
Yeah.
not the way I wanna win.
Sure.
And it's typically not the way that I would try to win. I try to finish my matches. Even if I have a high advantage of points, I'm typically still trying to finish the matches,
Yeah.
because that's kind of like more of a, your own personal philosophy about things. And so there's that. But with the Jiu-Jitsu Open, what we're trying to do is incentivize going for Jiu-Jitsu and being aggressive through the entire match. So, because it's subjective, because there's a ref's decision, it's not like some submission only where there's a draw. I
Yeah.
don't want there to be a draw. I want there to be a winner and a loser at the end of it. We need to make sure someone wins, someone loses, because it'll make people go forward. But at the same time, one of the things that we judge on on heavily is who is pushing the action from a technical standpoint. And we know
Right.
who's pushing the action from a standpoint of going for stuff versus just looking busy and basically staying out of danger. So, as
Right.
an example, there was a match that I watched where a guy got up by an advantage, and then he almost got swept several times during the match. And this was at the one of the IBJJF competitions. And every time the guy would almost sweep him, he would literally jump out of bounds, run away from him. Now, the guy on the bottom was the aggressor. He was constantly going for sweeps. He was constantly trying to engage. The other guy was disengaging. So in a
Mhm.
Jiu-Jitsu open match, he would lose. The guy on
Yeah.
top. Now, in the
Yeah.
point-based competition, he won by an advantage. But in our competition, he would have lost because he was disengaging and he wasn't trying to actually go for anything. And so that's the thing. We're trying to incentivize you to actually sit down there, draw the line, and battle. Right? That's because that's the goal. And I'll say this: it's very easy to watch an entertaining match at the Jiu-Jitsu Open. You walk I walk around the entire day, and there's great matches the whole time.
Yeah.
People are just going for it because, one, there's kind of an energy in the room where it's a bit relaxed. It's on the relaxed side, because
Yeah.
everybody knows they're gonna get multiple matches. So you're not gonna have a situation where someone goes one and done. So they all know they have multiple matches that day. But then on top of that, because of the rule set, we're judging on some legitimate submission attempts where, like, you actually have the person in danger for a couple of seconds at least, right? Um, Positional dominance, meaning
Yeah.
you've taken to the person and you now have them back mount, side control, or mount, or aggression through technical means, right? So you're trying to push the action. All of that is like that's what we want to see in jiu-jitsu, right?
Mhm.
So to me, we're incentivizing good jujitsu, aggressive jujitsu. I'm not incentivizing someone to skirt the rules or to play this game of like, I'm going to do a bunch in the beginning and then do nothing for the rest of the match, because that's not how we like to do things. And so, for the most part, it's been very aggressive. We have very few issues of having to call stalling calls or anything. And so it's been good.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like how you would envision your jiu-jitsu or your competition or your tournament, like your match going, right? Aggressiveness, going forward, going for the finish. That's kind of your philosophy essentially, right? Trying to finish the match, trying to be exciting. And I think that feeds into the rule set, which I think is great because I had a lot of fun, and you can stall at some of these, and maybe squeak out a victory, but it doesn't incentivize that. It makes it a lot harder. It makes the rules push you in a way that, like, a big one is the time of the matches. I mean, the adult expert are 6 minutes, but then like the masters are 5 minutes, which
Right. It's
I'm
not very
I'm cool
long.
with going five. Yeah, I like going five. Five's fun. Five's fun. I can push it for 5 minutes easy. That's a good amount of time to get some work in to really be able to, be aggressive, and you can kind of push a good pace,
Oh
even
yeah.
if you're an older grappler.
If you've got two guys that are engaging, like, I've heard this argument, "Oh, man, it takes a long time to get your jujitsu going." Like, no, it doesn't. The long time usually means that one person's being very defensive. If you got two dudes or two ladies, right, who are just going after it, who are trying to attack each other, you will have ample opportunity to get your jiu-jitsu going. What ends up happening a lot of times is that people play very defensive because they have a long match, right? They have a 10-minute
Sure.
match, and so they play very, very defensive. And so, yeah, playing defensively is going to mean that you're going to have to take a long time to set up your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But if you have two people that are engaged, really going after you, it's going to happen. And going back to one of the points that I missed earlier that I was saying is essentially most things are basically a big giant game. And if you structure them in a way to incentivize the proper behavior that you want, you can tend to get what you want. I mean, you know what I mean? It just is what it is, right? So, like, I mean, you see this from life all the way through. I mean, like, even as parents, right? Like, you try to set up incentive systems to get kids to show good behavior,
Yeah.
right? And, like, you try to give them proper incentives, and incentive structures are powerful. The incentive structures are far more powerful than punishments. And
Mhm.
so, a lot of times, like, you'll hear like a tournament that'll say, well, we're gonna, speed up the stalling calls or whatever. It's like, no, no, create better incentive structures. Maybe change how you're doing some of these points or get rid of this thing or that thing, just change some of these things to, as far as the incentives go, so that people are pushed to do things in that manner, right? And so with the Jiu-Jitsu Open, we're constantly tweaking it because it's not perfect and it's only our first year. But one of the big ideas is trying to create an incentive structure that gets people to do jujitsu that is worth watching. And this is my whole thing about it, my philosophy on it. Jiu-Jitsu is like an art. It's an art form, right? It's a martial art, and there's an art side to it. And we don't have canvas with paint or sculptures and things like that. We don't have any of that stuff. What we have is our movements on the mats. That's our art form.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you're gonna do it, you might as well have something worth watching. You know, a lot of people are gonna record. They're gonna record their matches. They're gonna look at them afterwards, right? So don't you want to have something to watch? Don't you want to have something to look back on and like, man, look how good that is? Or don't you want to have something to that's worth talking about? Having a good battle and being able to like talk to someone, oh man, this is a great match, whatever, opposed to, oh man, like, I've literally seen people force DQs where they move someone into a reaping position. And you would think that it would be an accident, but I've seen them do it multiple times. This person I'm thinking about, you move someone into like a reaping position and they draw the DQ. Who wants to win that way? Like what a terrible way to go back home. And how'd you win? Oh man, me and this guy are going, and I pushed him into a reap and got the DQ. It's the lamest way to win ever,
Mhm.
or to win by like a weak advantage. Like the matches that I have that I talk about, the ones that I talk about the most fondly are the ones where me and the guy are going back and forth and having a battle. Even the ones that I lose, I look at those fondly. The ones I don't really look fondly are the ones where me and the person end up stalemating to some degree. And there's sometimes where I'm trying to push the action, but guys are tough sometimes. Sometimes you just have those
Mhm.
matches and they're not really great, but you try, and if you try, you'll have more matches than not that end up being aggressive and fun to watch. So I think that's really what we're trying to do, is create an incentive structure that supports aggressive jujitsu that's worth watching, that's worth being a spectator at, but at the same time, it's more fun to be a part of, right? Everybody wants to have
Mhm.
good matches. They like having a good match. They like having those battles. So we want to make that happen.
All right, so my last thing I wanna talk about is if you have a student that's going out there and you feel like they're a sore loser or their sportsmanship isn't where you feel like it should be as far as a representation of you or the gym. How do you go about addressing that? This is kind of for the coaches out there, even for the parents. Maybe how do you address like your kid or your student that's not really living up to the standard that you have for your gym?
Yeah, and obviously this is all subjective, right?
Sure.
But the sore winner, sore loser thing, right? So like, let's talk about sore winner and then we'll talk about sore loser. So sore winner, I remember like when I was young, I was a bit of a sore winner. I remember in high school
Mhm.
wrestling, uh, I remember I started getting good at wrestling and I started getting this kind of ego about it because I was insecure and it's like I was finally good at something. And I remember like when I would win my matches, there was a couple times I did it. I got up and I flexed like the most, like, the Hulk Hogan most muscular flex pose. And I got up, if I pinned someone, I'd get up and flex. And I remember my coach, the last time I did it, I pinned this kid real quick, it was like a 25-second pin, super quick. And I got up and I was getting ready to flex. And I remember my coach says, "Don't do it." And I stopped and like put my hands down and just got my hand raised. And as soon as I walked off the mat, he took my coach was a big man. He'd like 290 pounds. He takes his hand and just smacks me in the back of the head. Just smacks me right in the back of the head.
Yeah,
He said, "Jesus Christ, son, act like you've been there before." It's like,
there you
act
go.
like you've been there before. Right. And so like now, and maybe this is maybe an overcorrection. If you watch me win now, it's like I get my hand raised. I deadpan. You won't see me scream. You won't see me like yell. About the most you'll get from me is like a handshake that's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's about it. Because it's like, again, I'm like, cool, I won. I've won lots of stuff. I've been here before. I've done this before. But also there's a side of me that too is I want to be respectful to my opponent,
Sure.
because like I've been in that situation and have someone screaming and yelling on the other side. It's just like, it's like salt in the wound. It's like, it's not necessary. I'll go celebrate with my students. I'll go celebrate with my buddies when we're having beers afterwards. I'll do my celebrating then. But when I'm in the mat, get my hand raised, deadpan. I've been here before. I've won multiple medals. I've got multiple nogi pans with world titles, right? So there's that, right? And so if I see a student who's sore winning, I will come up to them and like, get on them a bit, right? I had one guy at a tournament once where local tournament, he gets up and he like takes his gi and strips it down and he's like, yeah, like basically like sort of a la Rodolfo Vieira circa 2012, basically slaps his gi down so his shoulders and his chest are exposed. And I remember I was like, I saw it. I said, put your damn gi on, like, and like, just be cool, and he was talking about how the other guy maybe was talking trash about him or something beforehand. And I don't care. That's not who we are. That's not what we
Mhm.
do. Like, if you come from our gym, like we have a lot of winners. Like, so when you win, you're a part of that. Don't act like that. That's not what we do. And we've also had sore losers, right? Very few, but some, sore losers. And again, with that, you talk to them as best you can. The sore loser is a bit of a toughie. One guy that I'm thinking about, he ended up leaving the gym for a number of different reasons. Um, it kind of goes back to the sore losers. It's an ego battle, right?
Yeah.
But the sore loser, you just talk to people as best you can and try to sort of set an example. First off, like, will you see me yell and scream like that if I lose? No, you're never going to see me do that. I'll get up and take my L like a champ. Just that's it. Took my L, walk off, do it again. That's that. And so again, you lead by example, number one. But when you see the bad behavior, you try to check it as best you can. But people have their personalities and stuff like that. But and I think a lot of times too, you'll see it from younger people more than older people. Not always, but more often. And you try to just guide them through it, because everybody does it at least once, probably, right?
Mhm.
Everybody throws a fit about it at least once, and you sort of just give them some grace, because I did it too, right? We've all done it. And so you try to like guide them through it. It's like when you have like a young teenager who's having some breakup or something that they think is like this big end of the world ordeal,
Yeah.
and being a little older and having some wisdom and gray hairs, you're like, this ain't a big deal, bro. And it's not a big deal, but they think it's going to be a big deal, because when you were that age, you thought it was a big deal too. So you just kind of help them go through it and play damage control, right? Let's just dial it back a little bit, and so you do your best to help them, but understand you got to give them some grace, because they're going to make the mistakes. And so you can't come down too hard on them. But I think a lot of it, at least for me, is from the coaches or the leader standpoint, is by leading by example.
Yeah.
Like what are the best guys in your gym? How do they go about it? That's the example that's set. It always starts from the leadership. And so if you have like the leadership of the gym, throwing fits, well, then you're going to have the lower parts of the gym throwing fits. If the leadership in the gym is relatively just chill and whatever, it's the way it's going to be lower end, because you're basically setting the tone for what are we supposed to do. Oh, all right, that's what we're supposed to do. They're showing us right there, and you do it through action rather than words.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed that episode of the podcast, got something from it. Hopefully a couple of the stories of my losses and sort of coming back from those losses to make it something useful, maybe helped out a little bit, in case any of you guys ever run into a crappy situation, a bad call, or maybe if you're in that situation right now. Again, we've all been there before, but again, it's the idea of jiu-jitsu itself, right? Like, what is jiu-jitsu more like? I mean, when you look at jiu-jitsu in a nutshell, it's this thing that teaches you to take ownership of what's going on, and you do what you can with the skills and abilities you have. And when something comes your way, you simply just put it on your shoulders, and you do the best you can with what you have available to you, right? And
Mhm.
you understand that things aren't always going to go your way. Sometimes things may be a little unfair, but overall, if you put a lot of hard work in, you'll generally do all right. And in a lot of cases, with the unfair calls, you can get over them with better skill, right?
Mhm.
Because again, if some guy had an advantage on you, you could have somehow swept him and got points.
Yeah.
You just couldn't figure it out because your technique wasn't there yet. So that's the way I look at it. So anyway, hopefully it was useful to you. Maybe you got an idea to chew on from it. And if you get into a competition where you get screwed over, take the idea from old Abe Lincoln and just write a letter, on your computer or your phone or whatever, and let that sucker sit for a day or two, and then come back to it when you're not so emotional. Just look at it and be like, all right, I'm good. I don't need to post this, because more than likely that's what's going to happen. We post out of the impulse of emotion, but
Mhm.
it's not what you should do. And again, it's social media, so the stuff's there forever. You know what I mean? And you don't want to show your weakest moments like that, where you're doing something that you wouldn't tell your kids to do. You wouldn't do you wouldn't tell your buddies to do. You're like, look, just it's not necessary.
For
But
sure.
anyway, that said, thank you guys for watching or listening to the podcast, maybe watching if you're on YouTube. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charles Web CBD. If you guys have never checked them out, I'm a fan of their products. I've been with them for a number of years, using their stuff since like 2018. I think they make a terrific product. They ensure the quality and the purity of the product, third-party testing, so you know what's in the bottle is what's in the bottle. Again, it's one of these things where CBD is it's an unregulated product by the FDA, right? So the FDA doesn't regulate the thing. So again, there's sometimes some criticisms about the FDA. I think rightly so. But one of the things is that you do get at least some oversight into supplements, like because like back in the day there were some crazy supplements out there. There was
Oh
one
yeah.
that was like, I forgot what they were selling, but it was like they were selling like, it was like radioactive water or something, and like they were,
What?
oh yeah, dude, it was crazy. They were selling like this radioactive water, and they were saying, oh, it's great it's a health tonic, and like people
Uh-huh.
were just dying left and right. And like eventually the FDA got created because of things like that. Like, oh, like, you know people are not being honest, and
Oh
I
my
think there
god.
was and I don't know, I didn't know too much about it, but my wife and I were watching this movie that was based on a situation where they were making these watches that would glow, and
Uh-huh.
to make them glow, they would put these they would lick something, and they would like put the little numbers or whatever on it, on the clock thing, and the thing that made it glow was like, it was like this radioactive substance.
Uh-huh.
And so all these women that worked in this factory were just
I've
getting
heard
like
this.
their jaws were like falling out and stuff like that. And when they would go to
Wow.
um this business to say, hey, like this is killing us, the business would just hire lawyers, everything else, and sweep it under the rug. And eventually they had a big lawsuit, and you have things like the FDA that were created to take care of that. So while there are bad stuff to the FDA, I think there's also the good side of it, where it's like, well, at least you don't have like radioactive crap in your supplements, so that's a good thing, right? And
Mm.
so, but that said, with CBD, it's not FDA regulated, so there are situations where if you buy a CBD supplement, it could literally be who knows what's in the bottle, because it's not FDA regulated. I mean, they're probably not going to put radioactive stuff in your bottle. You don't have to worry about that. But there could be varying amounts of the CBD, and there could be other substances that are in that bottle that are not listed on the label. Which, again, with the supplements from Charlotte's Web, everything is third-party tested, so you can ensure that quality and the purity is up to snuff. And again, if you guys want to check out any of their stuff, charlottesweb.com. The promo code is JiuJitsu30 for 30% off the order. Also, guys, if you're in the market looking for some new jiu-jitsu gear, and even if you're not in the market, one of the things I sort of share this to you as an aside, one of the things that always kind of gets me ramped up to train a little bit more is to get some new gear. I tend to, anytime I'm getting ready for like a big training camp, I like getting new gear, because just being able to train in a new set of rash guard shorts or gis or whatever always kind of just gets me excited. Little retail therapy to make my jiu-jitsu better, to help me get out of to just give me some motivation to go train, because I just want to break in a new rash guard. But again, if you guys want to check out any of Epic Roll's stuff, epicrollbjj.com is the website. Epic Roll makes a ton of really good gear: rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, gis, the whole thing. Anything you want jiu-jitsu related, they've got it, and you can get a 20% discount with the code ChewJitsu20 for 20% off the order. If you guys want to support the podcast directly and get a list or a bunch of different perks that come along with this, join our Patreon by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up, obviously you're supporting the podcast, you're helping to keep going. We appreciate the heck out of you guys. It's super inexpensive. And on top of that, you'll get access to a library of content that has, mainly, there's a lot of other stuff in it. There's basically stuff with all the different guests we've had. There are interviews and things like that are unreleased. But the thing that I always try to sort of let people know about is like the warm-up routines that Eugene's created, which could be really useful. I mean, that to me is worth the price of admission right there. Having a warm-up routine or a stretching routine specifically for jiu-jitsu is really useful. And so he's created those. Those are in there. And then there's also some seminars that are recorded. Those are in there as well. Plus a bunch of back-end footage if you guys want to check it out. Patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast is the website in case you want to get it. And guys, last but not least, if you guys want to get my daily email where I go into jiu-jitsu training, diet, lifting, everything else, just whatever is on my mind that I think might be useful to you, then you can do that by going to my website at jiujitsu.net/join. And when you join up, you'll get access to my daily email. Now, when you join up, I recently released a focused jiu-jitsu ebook. I rewrote it and released it, and it goes into 12 different training strategies that you can implement from white to black belt in your open training sessions to get more from your training. This is useful for anybody that doesn't have 7 days a week to train, who needs to get more from the training. It's a good idea. So check it out at the website, jiujitsu.net/join. And guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.